As someone who has enjoyed Dark Souls, I am aware of a clone named Nioh. I know that some people dislike the description clone, but Nioh is just too obvious in that aspect. It introduces a lot of new things, but it still copies so much, most of it one-to-one, that not calling it a clone would be dishonest. This doesn't deter me from playing it, however, on the contrary. It was something that I was looking forward to. Initially it was released as a PlayStation exclusive, but then the complete edition was released on PC. The choice was easy for me since I can simply use the PS4 gamepad to play it on the PC, and unlike the PlayStation 4 version where I would have to accept that it will not be in ultra-wide when it comes to resolution, on PC this would surely not be a problem, right? Wrong. I was hoping for much better frame rates and ultra-wide resolutions and was disappointed in every aspect. You get the same graphics options as on the PlayStation. At best you are looking at 1080p at 60 frames per second, and of course no ultra-wide resolutions were being supported at all. The frame cap is mandatory because the game is actually bound to it, and unlocking the cap would make the game move at turbo speeds and ruin the gameplay. So 60 frames per second is really the best you are going to get here, period. The ultra-wide resolution can be achieved by using a community fix, so at least that was something good about it. But explain to me why the players have to make fixes for something that should be absolutely mandatory on a PC in 2018. It's ridiculous and absolutely unacceptable. They charge €50 for this game on Steam, but don't even have the decency to make any actual improvements. Even simple ones like ultra-wide resolutions were not included. Oh, and if you were hoping to play with your PS4 gamepad and hoping that you would see PS4 gamepad key prompts, you are also out of luck. Only Xbox key prompts are included. That's not that bad, but it seems like such a simple addition, and yet even that is not here. The complete edition also features or released additional content so that you can at least enjoy the full story. If you were playing it on the PlayStation 4, you would have to actually pay for that last part of the story or be left with a cliffhanger. These practices should honestly be outlawed. I've mentioned how the game is copying stuff from Dark Souls, and that includes the poorly told story. I know some people disagree with this claim, but a story should be told as you progress through the game naturally. If I have to look for it in other sources and read a bunch of side things, then the story presentation has failed. Imagine reading a book and constantly having footnotes telling you to read something else if you want to know who this character is or what the story is all about. The player should not be confused and unclear about what is happening and why. If he is, then this is bad storytelling, period. And that's mostly the case here. You will meet historical figures, hear brief explanations about the complicated political matters, and watch convoluted cutscenes unveil in front of you. All of this will leave you quite confused for the most part unless you read the journal entries about all of the characters and their relations to the story and one another. The game's protagonist is named William. He's an Irish pirate who was hired by the British Empire for the task of gathering Amrita. Amrita are crystals with mystical powers. England wants to use them to defeat the Spanish Empire. After they no longer need William, he is imprisoned in the Tower of London. This was done so the secret of Amrita can stay hidden from the rest of the world. Now initially I was kind of wondering why they wouldn't just kill him, but then it turns out that he has a guardian spirit, and that guardian spirit makes it basically impossible for him to permanently die. He will keep resurrecting. At least that's how I understand the explanation the game gives you. The game starts in a prison just like in Dark Souls 1 did, and your task is to escape. During your escape you meet the antagonist Edward Kelly, who steals your guardian spirit and leaves for Japan, so you follow him. It is later explained that, as I've just said, the guardian spirit is the reason why William is incapable of truly dying. And at first this seems like a very good explanation for the resurrection after each death in the game. It's reasonable and it does make for a good story when you think about it. Why does the character come back to life all the time? Well, because he can't really die. But the first question I have here is, since your guardian spirit is what prevented you from truly dying, why do you still resurrect after you die? After all, she was stolen from you, so you no longer have her. I mean, besides the obvious reason being that permadeath would be idiotic in a game which tends to kill you many times. But the crazy plot does not relent. During your journey to Japan, you find a book about martial arts and learn them from it. At this point we have to assume that William is a savant and perfect athlete as well, because as you get off the ship you're ready to kick ass and kick it well, all thanks to the descriptions of the fighting styles mentioned in that one book. You kill demons and people without too much of an issue. The game takes place in ancient Japan and features a large large cast of historical figures who will interact with you. This is the first thing that I found positive about the game. Unlike Dark Souls, you get to meet a lot of other people. They all talk to your protagonist, he talks to them so he's not silent, and the voice acting is generally very good, as long as the Japanese don't try to talk English though. Hanzo is a particularly hilarious English speaker. Just listen to this part and pay special attention when William tells him that he's impressed with his English. It sounds almost like sarcasm.
Who are you?
A foreigner? Your skill against Oni is impressive.
As is your skill with English.
My name is Hanzo Hattori. And you are?
Call me William. I'm here in pursuit of someone.
An enemy perhaps? Hunting a person down in a strange land will not be easy. If you lend me your strength in fighting Oni, I will help you in return.
Pretty quickly your abilities to kill demons impress the locals and they start recruiting you for missions. The story gets convoluted and at some point you will just be looking at the cutscenes for their artistic value. The story here is quite bad, but luckily the gameplay is mostly entertaining. It does however have some serious issues. For example, the fact that William will instantly die if he falls into deep water. I mean, right after the ship ride, which took 2 years, I made sure to completely undress him so that his armor does not weigh him down and tried to see if the water will kill him, and surely enough it does. It's just one of those insta-kill hazards in the game. It makes no sense from a lore perspective, especially considering the fact that he will jump into water multiple times in cutscenes and be just fine. As a matter of fact, he chooses that as a way to save himself, and during the gameplay that is killing you. It doesn't save you. Even when wearing heavy armor in the cutscenes, he still survives. But if you're completely without armor and jump in the water otherwise, you're dead. The main problem of the game, however, is the recycling of assets. After the first mission, you will find yourself on a map of the region and you get to choose your next mission. You have a choice between main missions, side missions, and twilight missions. The main missions are those that will advance the story and at some point lead you to the game's conclusion. The side missions are missions which almost always take place on the same maps as the main missions, but usually require you to find an item or kill a specific enemy, so they give you some kind of an objective. The Twilight missions are also on the same maps, but most enemies are replaced by much stronger demons. If you are a completionist like me, you will play every single mission offered and it will get boring fast. The only redeeming quality is the fact that you may get a short cutscene at the end of those side missions, which will explain a bit more about a character's background and their motivation. The bosses repeat in these missions as well, so do the enemies, of which you will not find too many in the game, by the way. The worst part is that the rewards are pretty much not worth it. I don't think I got anything better from the side quests than I did in the main missions. This will easily triple your playtime and make the game feel tedious very quickly. The problem here is that you do need those side missions, at least in part, because otherwise you will find yourself severely underleveled by the end of the game. I did mention that the bosses are repeating, didn't I? Some repeat so much that by the end, once you finish the first playthrough, in my case, I had fought one of them on Ryoki over 10 times. This is within one playthrough. Over 10 times the same boss on different occasions. Speaking of fighting, this is where the game can be quite complex. We actually have 3 different combat stances which we can switch up at any time. These stances carry different advantages and disadvantages with themselves. The low stance is the fastest and costs the less stamina when used, but also causes the least damage. It's quite good for some enemies that are really small and will walk on the ground, so they're hard to hit with the other stances because your strikes are positioned lower. The middle stance is balanced between damage and speed and was the stance of choice for me. The high stance is the slowest but does the most damage. You also have magic and ninja skills which work just as in Dark Souls. You have limited use, which can be replenished by using a shrine. The shrines are essentially the bonfires in this game. They have the same effect. All enemies except special ones will revive once you visit the shrine. You can also use talents to level up different weapon types, attacks, and unlock new ones. Additionally, you get more familiar with weapons and armor as you use them and gain small bonuses. This is a lot of depth here for those who want to dive into numbers. Tons of items are available and can be used to enhance your abilities. So many in fact that it seems a little too much to me. The beauty of it is that you do not really have to use any of these things, just like in Dark Souls. Your various items, skills, and the levels will only get you so far. What really matters is your ability to learn the patterns of the enemies and your reaction time. This is especially important when facing one of the many bosses. They aren't that hard to deal with, but some of them will still force you to try them multiple times. Should you die, you will drop all of your Amrita on the ground, which by the way acts as your experience. This is pretty much the same as in Dark Souls, but you also have to collect money separately. It's an improvement in my opinion. Dark Souls had the souls where essentially experience and money would be the same thing, and sometimes you would have to make tough choices. Here this issue is resolved. As I have mentioned, you dropped your Amrita on the ground and need to run back to it in order to regain it. However, your guardian spirit is also left on the spot of your death to guard the Amrita. This makes little sense here because dying a second time before reaching your initial corpse will cause all of that Amrita to be lost permanently and your guardian spirit will return to you. This is absolutely the same as it is in Dark Souls. So what's the point of the guardian spirit guarding it if it makes no difference? If you die again, you lose it anyway. It's just another layer of punishment while copying a Dark Souls mechanic one-to-one again. Why is it the punishment? Well, because fighting charges up the guardian spirit, and at fully charged, you can release it or summon it as a living weapon. During this time, you become invulnerable and impossible to stagger, but your living weapon timer does drop if you take hits, meaning that playing better will yield longer living weapon times, in which your damage is also increased. The guardian spirit also gives you bonuses passively when not summoned, so taking it away is just a punishment overall. This is where I want to talk about all the Dark Souls clones in general. Why must so much of Dark Souls generally be copied one-to-one? I mean, even their advertisement is often pretty much the same. On the Steam page of Nioh, you can read "Ready to die?" in the first sentence. Does that remind you of the "Prepare to die" slogan from Dark Souls? Back then it made sense because the difficulty has become a selling point of the game and the series, but for Nioh this kind of advertisement is simply idiotic. Why? Because if I ask you, what game do you think of when you hear "Ready to die?" your answer will almost always be Dark Souls. It's bad advertisement and lazy at that, and it even doesn't direct your thought into the direction of the game, it directs it into the direction of a better game. And a lot of these clones suffer from the same debilitating problem. Even the death message and the logo remind you of Dark Souls. Even here, the Nioh logo or the death message that you see, it's all kind of a little bit different, but essentially pretty much the same. Too much is copied. It reminds me of the Doom clones of old days, back when pretty much every game was like Doom, but with a slightly different setting, but essentially the gameplay mechanics were identical, even the engine was. In my opinion, Nioh would have been an even better game, or rather to say a much better game, had it been its own thing rather than what it is now. Currently, most of the things that are different from Dark Souls are actually worse, and the things that are similar are often not executed quite well. Take the shortcuts for example. Most of them are simply stupid and you have to really suspend your disbelief in order to accept them. There are small wooden doors which would have been no problem for anyone to climb over, let alone break down if they had a melee weapon. And here you have many different such weapons. Some of them are great axes, a weapon originating from a tool designed to chop down wood. Give me an axe and put a small wooden door in front of me, I will chop through that door in 30 seconds. Not because I'm very good with an axe, but I have actually chopped the tree to try it for fun. It's really tough work, but I'm certain a small door like that will be absolutely no challenge. There is no form of jumping in this game, and there are parts where you could easily vault over a knee-height railing. Just instead of that, now you have to walk all around the level in order to get to the other side of this thing that you could just simply vault over if you were like a normal person. Now let's talk about the visuals. This is where things are totally weird. Some of the character models look really nice and others look kind of pixelated and bad. The game's overall appearance is bad. I would have not believed that this is a game which came out in 2017 if I had not seen it myself. The environments lack details, the levels feel barren and often boring. It doesn't help that there are so few enemies to use in this game that the levels are constantly being recycled. There are a few more original levels, but most of them are still quite boring. The problem here is also that the design of these levels is confusing. They branch out and you can never be sure where you're supposed to go. The game gives you a compass with a general direction, but I found that to be rarely of any use. There are secrets such as finding these little dudes, the little green ones for the shrines that you can collect, which will then grant you small bonuses. But the problem with that is that they reset every time you go to a new region, so you have to constantly keep a lookout in the levels for these little guys, break all the breakable stuff if you want to find them. And while it can be satisfying, at the same time it feels yet again like a grind, and that's the game's problem. Very few things in the game don't feel like a grind after 10-20 hours of playtime, and you're easily gonna spend a lot more than that. I think it took me around 80 hours to finish it. So after several missions, you get to go to another region of Japan and do some more missions. The character development can also be very bad. For most of the campaign, you're accompanied by a spirit cat who talks with the voice of an old Japanese man who has been smoking all of his life. No idea why the Japanese connect this kind of senile voice with wisdom, but to me it was just annoying. I'm going to allow myself a little spoiler here, but I'm sure that nobody will really mind it since it's not very significant. That cat at one point will decide to sacrifice itself. Why am I mentioning this? Because the game attempts to make it into an emotional moment. However, the thing is that the cat becomes a demon and you have to kick its ass yourself. Not only is it not likable and the player does not really build any kind of connection with this character, but it's actually quite liberating to finally dispose of it yourself. I actually suspect that someone from the development team thought to himself that it would be satisfying if the player got to kick the damn cat's ass himself and thus rid himself of it. It's quite satisfying, I tell you that. It doesn't even provide you with any bonuses like an actual spirit guardian that you have with you. The cat is just there for exposition, and it's very bad at that. By the way, remember William's main motivation to go to Japan? It was in order to recover his spirit, which got stolen from him. That does happen at the end of the game, and as a proper Dark Souls clone, you get to have the option to replay the game multiple times and keep improving your character, his stats, his level, his equipment. So you would think that the spirit will be awesome because you fought so long and so much in order to get it, right? Oh, it's not. There are better ones, both in terms of bonuses and from a visual point of view. And speaking of the second playthrough, the game does start dropping better loot, and loot is king in this game. I know it sounds strange, but this game drops so much loot that it reminded me of Diablo. This is something that is different from Dark Souls, and while I was excited about it first, ultimately it became a pain to deal with. You can hold a lot of loot, but it's not an infinite amount. Not too long, you will be forced to disassemble some of it or sell it and somehow get rid of it, even drop it because your bag will be full. This doesn't sound like a big deal, but wait till you see the loot value system. Modern RPG games have established a color pattern for loot, and at this point we are all mostly used to it. Gray is crap, then comes green, then comes blue, then gold, and eventually even orange for legendary items. There's some games where the system is slightly different, but slightly is the key here. For the longest time I was unsure what color is what in this game. As it turns out, gray, gold, blue, green. This is the order. The last being mystical weapons, and they will actually start dropping at the end of your first playthrough and the beginning of the second, and then throughout the second playthrough if you want to go on. Why was this so confusing to me though? Mostly because you will find gold items which are still much better than the blue ones, and other similar exceptions. Not to mention that the many different statistics each item has. A weapon can give bonuses to attacks, to heavy attacks with one stance only, and all kinds of stuff. It's just a lot of stats that you need to consider. I know some people want great depth in an RPG like this one, but to me the Souls games and their clones were always about the player's skills first. Here, the gear of your character can be the deciding factor most of the time, more so than in any Dark Souls before. And the issue is that you are bombarded by it all the time, so you have to check almost every time you get a drop because improving your gear is too important to postpone for later. It can make the difference between victory and defeat. This is yet another problem when you are a clone. If you stick too much to a game you are imitating, then you become boring. If you deviate too much of it, you piss off your target audience, the people who actually enjoyed the game you are copying blatantly. In other words, you can't win no matter what you do. You have placed yourself in the shadow of a game and there is virtually no way to get out of it. Still, the game had its moments for me. I did enjoy most of the combat, and the Japanese setting was quite an interesting twist. I did like the idea of the living weapons, especially because they can help the impatient player finish off a boss, which has been very hard, and that is very satisfying because I've died so many times in Dark Souls simply because the boss has very little HP and I just try to go for these hits and get killed. Literally at the end it can be so frustrating. This, by making you invulnerable for a short period of time, really helps with that. But there are many things that I did not like. The storytelling is so bad that it's like like having a crazy person explaining their visions to you. You can't get it because the information is not delivered properly. It's all over the place, too much is skipped, there is too much that relies on your prior knowledge of Japanese history, of which most players will have absolutely none to begin with, me included. The story introduces plot twists that make no sense to the player. At one point, a mage reveals his face, which until then has been covered by a veil, and everyone's shocked. But the player, in this case me, is just sitting there and feeling like it should be shocked, but that face is absolutely new to you. You've never seen this face as the player, and it is new. You have to read the journal to get some idea of who that person is and why his review is so shocking. What great storytelling, right? The other problem is that most of the characters just look alike. Call me a racist, but they just do. And you meet so many of them and so many change their alignment that it's hard to remember who they are. People who are your enemy in one level are your friend in another, and the reasons for those switches can be very varied. I'm sure knowing more about the story would have helped, but since Dark Souls is shit at telling a story, the clones aren't allowed to be good at it either apparently. Let's read the item descriptions and journals and watch YouTube videos in order to understand anything. That's not good storytelling, period. I spent a lot of hours playing this game and accepted a lot of its problems as a result of copying Dark Souls. It is what it is, and if you've enjoyed the Souls games, you will find enjoyment in playing this game as well. But let it be said that it is inferior to the games it tries to copy in almost every aspect. The story is really poorly presented. Most of the characters are indistinguishable from one another. There is too much recycling of levels and bosses happening. It has a ton of loot, but the game is also way too focused on it. It does feature a certain degree of grinding for loot and Amrita as well. The graphics are bad, except for some of the character models, and with no possibility to really improve the graphics altogether, it just feels like so much was done wrong here. If you want to play in ultra wide, get ready to search for the community fix online because the developer doesn't care. I've also heard that the game is way too heavy and can stutter on mid-range PCs. I've upgraded mine not too long ago, so I have no way of testing that, but people should consider it if they don't have really strong rigs. To me, Nioh was disappointing. So much was copied from Dark Souls that the game almost feels like a mod. If you love the Souls games, then you will surely enjoy this one, at least to some degree, but I would advise to get it when it's reduced and not pay the demanded $50 for it. While a lot of work was put into it without a doubt, I don't believe that one should reward the amount of work put into a product, but rather the overall quality of the result of that work. The ambitions were clearly very high, but the result is an uglier game where levels and bosses are recycled so much that the game gets extremely boring after one playthrough. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who will not agree with me, so I'm curious to hear about them and from them in the comment section of this video. Naturally, it would make me even happier to hear from people who do agree with me, but you can't have it all. In any case, I hope my review was informative or in the very least entertaining, and I hope to see you on the next one. Until then, have a great day and thanks for watching.